Okay, we're opening the executive session on House Bill 1565. Before we start that, we have replacing Paul Tudor, Representative Wallace, replacing Mary Griffin, Representative True, replacing Representative Amanda Gorg is Representative Matt Willem. Okay. And replacing Representative Southworth is Representative Carol Ebel. Thank you all for agreeing to come in and helping us hold the fort down. And that's it for replacements. Representative Bromley, you have a motion?
1565.
Interim study. 1565.
I make a motion on House Bill, interim study on House Bill 15. I make a motion of interim study on House Bill 1565.
Second.
Who said the second?
Mr. Bellman.
Representative Elmy. The motion of interim study made by Representative Bromley, seconded by Representative Elmy. You want to speak to your motion?
Yes. Well, first off, I'd like to thank Representative Aaron for bringing this bill forward. But, you know, the more we think about this, that this is a major change we're talking about doing here in changing the percentages that go to has to do with the opioid settlement money. And that pot of money is growing every week in terms of the settlements that are coming in. And I for one, wanted actually to see more money go to the counties. But after further discussion with AG Buffetti, it's clear that there was a lot that went on behind the scenes to establish the allocations the way they were. And I think we need to let those settle in before we start changing the distribution formulas. What we decided, I think the best thing for us to do is to keep this alive. I have no problem changing this down the road to a new formula, or at least to recommend a new formula. But for now, let's let this get off the ground. It's not going to be until March. The Department of Health and Human Services rules are going to be heard on March 15th. And then hopefully shortly thereafter, they'll be going to GELCAR so that we could start spending some of that first $2.7 million, that opioid money. But since then, we've had another settlement for another $115 million. Then we had another settlement for another $46 million, and there's others that are coming. So with that, I think it'd be prudent to keep this alive via interim study, I think we really do need more conversation on this bill before we start tampering with the formula. So I hope everybody joins me in an interim study. Thank you.
Further comments? Seeing none, I'm not going to ask the clerk to call the vote. If you're in favor of interim study, you will say yes, and if you're opposed, no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before we begin roll call, a lot of people are watching this at home on YouTube, and sometimes it's hard to hear what you're saying. So whatever you have to say, whether it's in roll call or anything else, say it loud, say it proud into the microphone. Thank you. The bill is HB 1565. The motion is interim study. We'll begin the roll call vote with Representative Abrami.
Yes.
Representative True.
Yes.
Representative Ullery.
Yes.
Representative Doucette.
Yes.
Representative Lang is not in the House, metaphorically. The clerk, Representative Burstein, votes yes. Representative Janigian.
Yes.
Representative Nunez.
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury.
Yes.
Representative Wallace.
Yes.
Representative Aaron.
Yes.
Representative Almy,
Yes.
Representative Ames,
Yes.
Representative Ebel,
Yes.
Representative Malloy,
Yes.
Representative Schomburg. Not here. Representative Tucker,
Yes.
Representative Gomarlo,
Yes.
Representative Loftman,
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm,
Yes.
Representative Hacken Phillips,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
and Chairman Major.
Yes. The vote being 21 to nothing, the motion of interim study passes without objection. It'll go on consent. I see no objection, so it'll appear on the consent calendar. Representative Bromney.
So everybody knows, the Senate has 5 of our bills, or 4 of our bills, being heard right now. Representative Lang is over there, and Representative Schomburger is over there. We knew this vote was going to be unanimous, that's why we voted without them. I have to go over at about 20 after, and then I have to go over at like 22. So there may be some bumps in this process here. Because, what can I say? It was supposed to be at 9 o'clock, and then they changed their schedule to 10 o'clock. And so we've got conflicts. Some of us have to go defend our bills over there, so thank you. We can do the one I think, is there any other that we're in agreement?
Hey, Susan. Okay, we're going to go out of executive session and go into a work session on House Bill 1097. And House Bill 1097. The paperwork piles up. An act relative to taxation of income of New Hampshire residents when working remotely for an out-of-state employer. And we have an amendment. On 1097, and is the latest one 1037H?
Yes, that is the only amendment that's before us, and it was distributed last evening, so
Okay,
That's-
Representative Spilsbury, it's your amendment. Would you want to explain your amendment?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I believe in the discussion during several work sessions, it was generally agreed that the state of New Hampshire needs to do something to counter the actions of the state of Massachusetts during the pandemic, asserting the power to assess real estate taxes and, income taxes and withholdings on New Hampshire residents who previously commuted to work in Massachusetts, but were then working from home, despite that all the work was being done within the state of New Hampshire. The original bill, as drafted, takes the stance that we are going to assert that no other state has the power to do this. We don't directly have the ability to define the power of another state or to control it. So we decided that we should reframe this so that we can take some action that's meaningful, with the idea that if our Attorney General again has to litigate, we want to give them all the armament they need so that they can cite to a direct position of the state and lay the foundation for a strong claim of standing. And in effect, it puts us in a position to say, while we can't control Massachusetts, we can defend an infringement on our sovereignty. So the bill has three parts. The working part is 78F1, purpose. This makes the assertion that we, John Janigian and I, have worked out with Sam Garland, Assistant Attorney General, and Keen Wong at the DRA. And we're very pleased with it. It says, in order to promote the health of its economy and the welfare of its citizens by preserving an environment in which labor is not unduly penalized, it is declared to be the sovereign interest of the state of New Hampshire that the income earned and received by residents of the state of New Hampshire for services entirely performed within the state of New Hampshire may not be subject to taxation as earned income in any other state. The F2 and the F3 are qualifiers that are just designed by the DRA to ensure that nobody can make an interpretation that business taxes cannot take account of all business activity wherever it's been done across the 50 states or worldwide, in fact. So this is just qualifier language to make sure that no misinterpretation can be made. I wouldn't ordinarily read a blurb, but this is fairly technical stuff, and so if you'll indulge me, I think you probably would benefit from just getting a preview of the blurb that I've drafted. This bill addresses an issue that arose during the COVID-19 pandemic when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts required that certain New Hampshire residents who customarily commuted to work at employer sites within Massachusetts, but who instead were working exclusively from home in New Hampshire, should continue to be subject to Massachusetts personal income tax and withholding requirements. Governor Sununu immediately lodged objection to this assertion of taxation power across state lines, but Massachusetts did not back off. Subsequently, New Hampshire, through its Attorney General, filed suit before the United States Supreme Court, invoking the court's original jurisdiction, quote unquote, under the U.S. Constitution to resolve legal disputes arising directly between two states. The court decided to not take the case, despite assertions that it was required to do so, dismissing the complaint without explanation, as is common. One can speculate as to why the justices elected not to take up the case, knowing that this is a power that they are reluctant to invoke, and knowing that they often seek to avoid further burdening their calendar when they do not believe a particular controversy demands resolution by them at that juncture. One possibility is that they did not detect that the state of New Hampshire had a sovereign interest to protect, independent of the claims of the individually aggrieved taxpayer who might conceivably be asked to litigate in his own right, thus drawing into question the issue of standing on the part of the state. Alternatively, they may have conjectured that the dispute was temporary, likely to disappear soon as the emergency receded. Indeed, more recently, in October 2022, Massachusetts let its emergency order in this regard lapse as the pandemic was lessening in urgency, thus rendering the pending dispute moot. Even so, the committee took up the bill with an eye on preventing a recurrence. As originally drafted, HB 1097 asserted that, quote, no state has the power to tax value earned outside of its borders, close quote, but it created no viable means of enforcing such an admonishment directly against any other offending state, and it potentially created ambiguities over the term, quote, value earned, close quote. The committee believes that HB 1097 addresses a very important issue that was offensive to New Hampshire's independent sovereignty, and that this issue must still be addressed preemptively, lest it arise again without recourse. But the bill needs to be reframed. in concert with the Attorney General and the Department of Revenue Services, the committee's amendment seeks to address that weakness by re-aiming the bill towards firmly and unequivocally establishing an explicit claim of policy and sovereign interest that will put other states on notice and clearly lay the foundation for successful litigation if it should ever again become necessary.
Thank you, Representative Spilsbury. Questions or comments? Representative Ames.
Well, thank you, Representative Spilsbury, for your hard work on this, and thanks as well to the agencies for working on this with you and whoever else worked on it. It's a complicated matter, I understand that. Here's my question, however. The concern that I think lies behind in adding the two additional parts about business taxes is that, in fact, with our business tax, and particularly with the adoption of the single sales factor, New Hampshire is and will be taxing income earned and received by residents of other states who are part of a business enterprise, whether it's a partnership, a sole proprietor, or a corporation that is selling into New Hampshire, where the services are that are taxed are entirely performed within that other state. And we want to continue taxing that those sales, that income that's produced by those sales. So we didn't, I believe these sections are in there to make clear that we want to keep taxing them. Well, so do other states want to keep taxing us. As we sell, our businesses sell into those other states. So it seems to me you're setting up a double standard and a situation that's very unlikely. And I haven't researched this. I know other lawyers may have to survive an undue burden challenge under the Commerce Clause. So maybe you could speak to that concern.
Thank you, Representative Ames. As you said, it's a complicated topic. Part of what complicates it is distinguishing income taxes from other taxes, distinguishing income tax on personal income versus business income, distinguishing income that may be earned as a W-2 employee versus as a 1099 contractor versus as a pass-through business entity using the benefit of subchapter S or LLC or sole proprietorship. So it's a very complicated area. I don't know whether we have solved it. I hope that we have come as close to the target as we can. It's intended to clearly refer to taxation of personally earned income. And the purpose of the second and third paragraphs is to make a distinction with the business tax, where I don't think it's so much that we tax activity elsewhere, it's that we take account of all activity and we use certain formulas and proportions which are in common use across the country. So time will tell how successful we are, but at the moment there is nothing in our law that would help lay the foundation for a similar lawsuit if the Attorney General has to take one again.
We have representation from the DRA. Does the DRA have any comments on what Representative Ames and Representative Spilsbury has said?
Morning. My name is Keen Ming Wong, Tax Policy Counsel from the Department of Revenue Agency Administration. We haven't specifically looked into the Commerce Clause consequences of this bill. our main objective was to ensure that any language that was proposed in this bill would not negatively impact the operations and the administration of the business taxes that we currently have. So that's the purpose of the additional two sections within the chapter.
Representative Almy. Representative Ames.
Thank you. The difficulty that we face as a committee right now is that we've just received this amendment last night, as you said. And although it's just 3 long sentences, or maybe there's a couple more in there, it's complicated, as you just said. And if indeed the objective is to sort of narrow the scope to income that's subject to income taxes per se, and not business taxes, then I suspect we could do, we could work on this language to improve it if we had time. I gather we don't have time because we're here, and I think this afternoon is the deadline for filing reports on bills like this. So we've run out of time, and an option is interim study. I imagine that's not, that's frowned on or maybe objected to. But that, to me, would be preferable. There's no urgency to this whatsoever that I know of. As you've pointed out, Massachusetts has backed away from the initiative during COVID that led to litigation, so that's not on the table anymore. No one's trying to tax the personal income earned by New Hampshire residents for doing work in New Hampshire for out-of-state firms, and then being taxed by the out-of-state, by that state. So I don't think there's any urgency. I know interim study right now means a year of study and then a bill in a new legislature next year. And that may not be what you want, but why not do a good job with the language and go forward with it.
Thank you, Representative Ames. Representative Almy.
Thank you. I have a question for Attorney Wong, but first I wanted to, I think that purpose is something that they usually take out of the bills when they put them into the law. And I can't remember if we've ever put purpose into the law, in which case, if it was taken out, this wouldn't make any sense. So has anyone looked into that? Representative O'Leary seems to think.
Yeah, if I may,
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chair.
Representative.
Representative Almy, there's several instances where the general court has put in the purpose or intent. When you say purpose in this section, it's actually an intent section.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, that we've done that before on a wide range of laws, mostly criminal, but you know, this is tax law, so might as well say what it's about. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I
Further.
ask the second
comment.
question, though? Representative O'Leary has seen this, so I wanted to ask Attorney Wong if you see any chance that some major corporation could take sections 2 and 3 of this versus section 1 and start a lawsuit about the basis of our business taxes.
I don't expect that the issues would arise from sections 2 and 3, because those sections 2 and 3 specifically just says that to maintain the integrity of our BPT and BET chapters. So So if any, I really don't expect that there's any tax practitioner would just parse out sections 2 and 3 and make a challenge. There's no language in there that would contradict our existing statutes.
Could I clarify?
Follow up?
Don't 2 and 3 acknowledge that we are doing something related, together with section 1, acknowledge that we are doing something that is opposed to what we're asking others to do?
Are you saying that, so the issues with section 1 then? Okay.
Well, with the combination
Combination.
thereof. Maybe if we'd hidden 2 and 3 somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Yes, so without 2 and 3, section 1 still works, but our concern is that tax practitioners that we've seen in the past could potentially read section 1. So usually the statutory interpretation is to read the statute as it is and apply it as it is. But we have seen in our practice that in our agency that some tax practitioners would read a certain statute and somehow read the inverse to be accurate and to be law as well. So what the statute might say, okay, tax might be not applicable to this situation, and then they would read it. Okay, so the inverse would be true then. So that's the purpose of having sections 2 and 3, so to avoid any kind of inverse reading of section 1. I don't know if that answers the question.
Not really, because
Okay,
it's
sorry.
such a complicated area behind this fairly simple language. Thank you.
Representative Janesian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to call everyone's attention to line 10 of the amendment. And if we look at line 10, the end of that line where it says, for services entirely performed within the state of New Hampshire may not be subject. So the word may, want to call attention to that word because previously the word was shall. And so one of the things that the Attorney General's office wanted to change was the word from shall to may, to soften this such that it would be less likely that someone misinterprets this. But still, moving this forward gives them the ability, if they have to go back to the Supreme Court. And so I think that word may softens it and should make this much less of a concern than when the word shall was there. And just as a further comment, I'd like to say that while Massachusetts has backed off, and right this minute there are no problems, the issue is if some other problem comes up, who knows where this whole energy issue is going. Maybe it gets to the point where people don't want to drive, people are at home again, Massachusetts comes back again and says, hey, we're back to that same thing again. And we don't have the time, we can't react, who knows how long it's going to take us to react. It's going to be at least a year till we can react to that. So I would propose that we move forward with this and we take note of the word may in line 10. Thank you.
Representative Yearly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for pointing out the word may, which makes this entire thing moot. Thank you.
Representative Ames.
Yeah, Representative Uller is always so precise in his wording that I'm left scratching my head. So thank you for that. And it really, I think, is the question I was going to raise. If you emphasize that word may, which is apparently a critical component of this redraft, then haven't you taken the guts out of this whole thing? And the Supreme Court is not going to go forward on a matter where it's sort of discretionary whether the state will do something. It's only if the state does something. If New Hampshire interprets this as a shall in a particular context, and it affirmatively does something to some corporation, that there'll be an issue sufficient for the Supreme Court to take it on. And so I think that that understanding further persuades me that this bill is not ready for prime time.
Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to respond to several different comments that have been made. First of all, I do not understand this may-shall distinction the same way it's just been described. You may not do something means you can't do it. Second, I acknowledge the tension between the personal income tax position and perhaps it would be better to have the word position instead of purpose at the beginning of paragraph 78F1. Position is the word that's used in line 3 describing the chapter and again in line 6 in the caption. So I don't think that's really ambiguous what's being done here. The tension is inherent in the problem. And I had preferred that we not have the second and third paragraphs, but I consider them to be essentially harmless. They don't detract from paragraph 1. And I think that one could potentially critique or handicap the potency of paragraph 1 if a situation arises. I would rather have this in law and increase my odds.
Representative Tucker.
Yeah, I'm afraid Representative Janigian got to my point, but I wanted to amplify it, and that is that because of the particular time now in international relations with Russia and the invasion of Ukraine, it certainly has made us much more aware of the rapidity with which energy prices can arise. Just the way 2 years ago we learned about the rapidity of how the reaction to the pandemic and the vast changes that have taken place. So it's true that we first were thinking of this in terms of the pandemic and that we had time to react and there was no rush. But I'm thinking that really the last couple of years have taught us that things happen rapidly and we need to be prepared. Presumably, as this goes forward to the Senate, there'd be chances to tweak some language. But I would feel more comfortable if we had a reaction now. And I'm interested in seeing whether we can move forward to get something in place.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's just an important moment for the committee to reflect possibly on the general hypothetical confronting us. As a state, if we set up a law that tries to tell other states what it can and cannot do, does that open the door for a neighboring state to set up a law to tell us what we can and cannot do? And just going through that exercise in your own mind right now, I'm sure we can all come up with scenarios that would be really unpleasant for all of us. And I think, the tax consequences to our taxpayers for proposing laws that are known to be litigated on such a premise is probably not expedient at this moment. And I do think that the idea is valuable to research further, and I definitely side with Representative Ames in this position. that more needs to be done at the AG's office to assure us that the language we're proposing is worth, backing fully in this in this amendment, if this is the law that we'd like to move forward with. I do think that the timing is just too quick to reach that level of comfortability at this moment, and that I think we're setting ourselves up for quite a fight, and I'm not sure we're putting ourselves in the best position to make that fight successful. So those are my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further comments? Representative Yurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Representative Hacken Phillips' last comment, states tell people of other states what they can and can't do all the time. For example, you can't drive in Massachusetts without putting your seatbelt on. That's part of the federal system we have, is that various different activities can be controlled. In this particular area, we're telling a state that they can't tax somebody for work that they've done, an individual for work that they have done within the confines of this state, even if it is engaged in international activity. I'm kind of reminded of my father, who worked for Hugh Gregg more than a year ago. When they were sold to Tripac, he was being paid out of Pennsylvania, which had an income tax. But no income tax was taken out because he was a resident of New Hampshire. It's Triangle Pacific, was the name of the company. And I think what we're trying to do here is to reassert long-standing IRS regulations or rules, which state the work done within the state is taxed by the state where the work was done, not by the place in which the person lives. What we're saying is, if you're doing the work in New Hampshire, and it may be for in this case, Massachusetts company, you still can't tax it because all the work was done in New Hampshire, even if you were entering it on a spreadsheet that gets sent someplace else when you finish doing your analysis or whatever you were doing in that time, making sales calls or doing customer service work on an hourly basis or whatever, so long as the work was done in New Hampshire. And I do agree with Representative Ames that the word may kind of moots this to nothingness. And the other point is, when you say, excuse me, may not do is one thing, but this is not saying that you may not do. It says, in this case, the word may has its alternative meaning, which there's a permissiveness element. Maybe it can be, maybe it can't. We don't know. We don't care. That's why it becomes moot, because it's not saying you shall not tax. And if you try to, that gives New Hampshire standing to defend the individual against the encroachment of a foreign state. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative Yurley. And Representative Nunes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I read it as if it gives the state of New Hampshire the right to defend itself as a sovereign state, period. That's the way I read it. And I would think that the other two sections that are in there are only in there as protectionism against those two types of taxes. So if we think about giving the state the right to defend itself against what I would call an outside attack on its tax system, then maybe we should look at it that way, as a defense mechanism.
Representative
Lockman, thank you.
Logman.
I agree with Representative Ullery about the word may taking the teeth right out of it, and I think we can look to the Attorney General making that suggestion as, you know, an indication that there is a distinct difference between shall not and may not. I agree with that. I think if we want a right to defend ourselves, if we want the power to enforce it, we're going to need a court ruling. And if we want a court ruling, I agree with Representative Ames that this would have to have teeth. And I think using the word may nullifies it a little bit. I don't think we'll get to that stage with that language.
Anybody new? Representative Almy, followed by Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you. I think all of us think that this is a really important issue with a very long time horizon at this point. Well, very long, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, because more and more people are going to be going remote. And that creates other problems, more problems even than the ones that this is trying to address, certainly than the very narrow Massachusetts law that was temporary. And I think that if we want to get this to a point where the Supreme Court would be forced to, the U.S. Supreme Court would be forced to work with us on this and figure out how to do this nationally, we need more allies than just ourselves to try to go there, especially just with a bill that one state with an odd tax system is asking for. It is a very odd tax system, would be asking to have resolved. I think that we need, the DRA needs time to talk with tax attorneys from other revenue departments all across the country about this issue of more and more people living in one place, working in another, and try to see if there are allies to bring forward something that is going to allow this, force the Supreme Court to take up an issue that they probably aren't going to want to take up because it's very, very complicated. So.
Okay, Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, of course, is a case of people living and working in the same place in New Hampshire. The essential distinction between the bill as originally drafted and this amendment is that the bill as originally drafted was aimed at Massachusetts or any other state that would take a similar position, and it's because we don't have the power to control their actions that it got reframed. The purpose of it as drafted in the amendment is to unequivocally state the policy and the sovereign interest so that it can be defended. And so I just want to echo Representative Nunez's comments that the purpose of the amendment is not so much to tell Massachusetts what it can or cannot do, it's to tell New Hampshire that we are going to defend this sovereign interest as enunciated here. As far as, may versus shall, I don't read it that way, but I would be glad to work with the Senate to put the word shall in place of may and remove all doubt. The last comment, I just want to make the observation so that the committee is aware that when this language was worked out yesterday morning, Assistant Attorney General Sam Garland personally took it to, reviewed it with Attorney General Formella, and got his sign-off. So I would like us to go ahead, and if there are reservations, let's work with the Senate.
Thank you, Representative Spilsbury. Representative Janine.
Yes, I just want to echo what Representative Spilsbury just said. We, the two of us worked with DRA and the Attorney General's office, and that's absolutely true. We worked with Sam Garland. He took it to the Attorney General. Yesterday, the Attorney General approved of this language. So I think it's, and they would prefer something as to, rather than nothing. And they would prefer this in case something else comes up, they're ready to go. And we still have the possibility of improving it further in the Senate. So I also would say, let's move ahead with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jean. Any further questions or comments? I have a question for Representative Ames. Representative Ames, from the discussion that we had this morning, all the reasons for and not, is there, in your opinion, is there a fix that you would like to see immediately, that can be addressed immediately? Because we must exec this today, one way or the other.
I'm not prepared to do that right now. That's, this is, as has been said by many people, complicated. It looks simple, but it's complicated. And you know, what I'd love to have the opportunity to do is what we did. If you'll recall, you were here when we dealt with the Wayfair matter. And if you'll remember, those who were around, that all started in the summer of one year, I don't remember which years we were at, with a special session and a special committee focused on the bill. I was on that committee, a number of others. Then counsel for the governor, Formella, was a key person in drafting a bill that went before the House and the Senate and failed. It wasn't ready. It wasn't quite right. We all well, we didn't all recognize it. I think the House voted for it, but the Senate voted it down. And then another bill was introduced, and it came to this committee. And we worked, if you'll remember, we had several work sessions on that bill with Attorney Formella and with Bill Ardinger, a well-known tax attorney and constitutional constitutional law attorney. And we made substantial changes in that bill as we worked through it. The goal being to set up a system that would enable New Hampshire to go forward to the Supreme Court, much like this bill is being developed, in a way that could make a difference for New Hampshire if, in fact, sales tax activity, in that case, is what was involved, threatened New Hampshire's sovereign interests. We worked out a good system, a good bill. We were all happy with that. It went through and was enacted, but it was substantially different from what came to us that fall. That's the kind of work we need in this case, and I appreciate that the Attorney General, now Attorney General Formella, took a look at this and said, yes, he supported this, but that's very different from sitting down, working through the complexities and making sure we've got something. It's not cheap to go to the Supreme Court. It costs a lot of money. And to go forward with litigation is something you don't do lightly. So I think you want to go forward with litigation with a strong hand, and that's the way I'd prefer to do it, and not rely on maybe negotiating a fix with the state Senate. So that's my response to that.
Thank you, Representative Ames. We're going to take a 5-minute recess at this point.
Well, we're going to want to caucus, I think.
And
But I just, if I
Go
could
ahead.
make a final comment on this, on what I'm really worried about is that you pass this the way it is, which is fairly innocuous because Attorney General Formella didn't want to have to defend a shell. And then we forget about it. We don't bother to do anything with it. We do have Wayfair totally set up for when the big sales tax states start going after the smallest sellers in other states. And that's why you don't hear much about it today. They aren't doing it yet. At least that's what the businesses tell us. And, but this is not sufficient to be able to get the Supreme Court to take it.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and
Can we have at least 10 minutes? We need to have a caucus.
we do too.
15 minutes maybe. 10?
We'll be back in 10 minutes.
Okay. 11. We're gonna go find a room on this floor. I think we can do
When
it.
we finish this, we'll have that hearing. Okay, the Republicans want to stay in here.
I just want to apologize for holding everything up here. I'll just say we're defending the House position in the Senate. So I apologize for the delay. By the way, they were nice enough to move the last bill up one so I could be here even quicker. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go into executive session on House Bill 1097. Hold on 1 second. Okay, we're going to go into executive session on House Bill 1097. Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On HB 1097, I move ought to pass as amended by Amendment 1037H.
First of all, you move ought to pass on 1097.
I do. I move ought to pass on
And
1097.
do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Bromley. Representative Spilsbury, do you have another amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move adoption of Amendment 1037H.
Seconded by? Who's that? Nunes. Representative Spilsbury, you want to talk to your amendment?
I believe we've had sufficient discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Spilsbury. Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Being none, all those in favor raise their hand. Oh, did you have Representative Ames? Okay. All right, we'll take a roll call. You want to call the vote on the amendment?
Sure, this is Amendment 2022-1037H. We'll begin the voting with Representative Abrami,
Yes.
Representative True,
Yes.
Representative O'Leary,
Yes.
Representative Doucette,
Yes.
Representative Lang,
Yes.
Burstein votes yes, Janigian,
Yes.
Representative Nunes,
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury,
Yes?
Representative Wallace,
Yes.
Representative Aaron,
Yes.
Representative Almy,
No.
Representative Ames,
No.
Representative Ebel,
Yes.
Representative Malloy,
Yes.
Representative Schomburg,
No.
Representative Tucker,
Yes.
Representative Gomarlo,
No.
Representative Loftman,
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm,
Yes.
Representative Hacken Phillips,
No.
Representative Murphy,
No.
Chairman Major.
Yes.
17 to 6.
The vote on the amendment was 17-6 of ought to pass, and so it passes. Now, we're on the bill.
Consent, right?
No, we're on the bill as amendment, as amended. And so with Amendment 1037H. Any further discussion on the bill? Motion of ought to pass as amended. I see Representative
Ebel.
Ebel.
And I realize I'm a sub, and you're not supposed to talk if you're a sub, but I just want to, and I haven't been in the previous hearings, I just want to clarify that even though the state of Massachusetts situation shone a bright light on the issue of other states charging income tax for people that work within the state. The state of New York has had this policy in a very aggressive way for many, many years, and there are many people that work remotely in this state that are associated with New York corporations that have had to pay the income tax. So it's not like this was something new. It's a thing that many states, well, I don't know how many states do it. I know that New York State does it, personally. So I just wanted to get it on the record for clarification's sake. Thank you.
Any further discussion or comments? Representative Elmy.
Just like to add that they were doing this when I was a child in New York, and this we certainly must at this point, because of the pandemic, have people living here permanently that are working in New York City. I know that there were, in fact, people in the North Country that regarded this as their home state, even though they spent most of their time in New York. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? All right, if the clerk,
Need a motion. We still need a motion.
we got, oh. Yeah,
That was for the amendment.
And
Oh, all right, no,
Yeah.
now you have to make an OTPA motion. You have to make an OTPA motion.
well, we'll do it again.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move OTPA.
And I second it.
As amended. So the motion is ought to pass as amended with amendment 0471H.
1037H.
Yeah. Okay, 1037H.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bill is HB 1097. The motion is ought to pass as amended. We'll begin the roll call vote with Representative Abrami.
Yes.
Representative True.
Yes.
Representative Ullery.
Yes.
Representative Doucette.
Yes.
Representative Lang.
Yes.
Representative Burstein votes yes. Representative Janigian.
Yes.
Representative Nunes.
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury.
Yes?
Representative Wallace.
Yes.
Representative Aaron.
Yes.
Representative Almy.
No.
Representative Ames.
No.
Representative Ebel.
Yes.
Representative Malloy.
Yes.
Representative Schomburg.
The representative from Nottingham has such a great voice. No.
Thank you, sir. Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Representative Gomarlo.
No.
Representative Loftman.
Yes.
Representative Wilhelm.
Yes.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
No.
Representative Murphy.
No.
Chairman Major.
Yes.
17 to 6.
The vote being 17 to 6, the motion of ought to pass with amendment 1037H passes. And it will be on the regular calendar.
Minority report. No, minority report.
Yeah, who's going to do the minority report? Representative Hacken Phillips.
And just to be clear, Representative Hacken Phillips, your motion will be for interim study as opposed to ITL. Thank you.
The next is House Bill 1221-FN. relative to the rates of the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax. Representative Janesian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion of ought to pass on HB 1221.
Second?
Second by Abrami. Do I hear another motion?
I'd like to make a motion on an amendment to HB 1221, amendment number 2022-0471H.
And I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Want to speak to your motion on the amendment?
Yeah,
Representative
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this amendment, the original bill basically lowered the business profits tax from 7.6% to 7.5%, and the BET, business enterprise tax, from 0.55% to 0.5. There was a concern that, given the tax cuts in the previous year, while business profits are up, tax revenues to the state are up, the impact of the PPP loans and the stimulus packages make it a little bit difficult to know exactly where we stand. So the amendment basically takes out the reduction in the BET tax and moves forward only with the lowering of the BPT tax. So the amendment basically lowers the business profits tax from 7.6 to 7.5%. And it's basically, we become very competitive. It was a goal that was put forth approximately 6 years ago when the business profits tax was 8.5. The goal back then was to get it down to 7.5. We are at 7.6. This would be the final 0.1% reduction. And we will compare very favorably with our neighbors in Massachusetts that have an 8% business profits tax, and our neighbors in Vermont, whose tax varies between 6 and 8.5%. And it gets to 8.5% as soon as it's over 25,000. So for all practical purposes, they would be virtually 1% higher. So I would urge passage of this amendment for those reasons.
Further comments on the amendment? Representative
Schamberg.
Schamberger.
I know I've been in Florida for 2 weeks. It's tough to remember any names. A question for the Representative Ganagian. You said this was a goal. You've reached that goal. Is that the position of the party now, not to go below 7.5 in the future?
I'm not going to speak to further goals at this point. Right now, this is the goal at hand, and this is what we're aiming for.
Thank you, sir.
Further questions or comments? Representative Almy.
Thank you.
Followed by Representative Gamala.
I would also like to know, point out actually, on that it is already impossible, so this probably won't make it any worse, to estimate our revenues because the single sales factor is hitting next year. We have no idea what it's going to do, except that the largest corporations are probably no longer going to pay BPT, and the manufacturing corporations. And we have a lot of other things that we've done that make it, we'll never know what market-based sourcing did. So we are now in complete, I just want to tell DRA that, that we know you're going to have an impossible time trying to estimate revenues, and so are we. Thank you.
Representative Gamala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to reiterate what I've said in the past 2 work sessions, that you're giving a break to the multinationals and not to our small businesses. And the small businesses are the ones that went through hell the last 2 years, not the big companies. And I realize the impact on revenue is greater, giving that 0.05% reduction to the small businesses versus the 0.1% to the bigger businesses. But I think the dollars that are saved by those smaller businesses will stay here in New Hampshire versus what you're giving to the big businesses that have admitted they don't always notice what they're paying for their business taxes. So are they going to notice their 0.1% reduction, whereas a small business in New Hampshire would notice their 0.05% reduction? Thank you.
Further comments? Representative Bromley, followed by Representative Janesian.
I just want to speak for the majority caucus here. That I think this caucus has shown a lot of restraint this year. We had an opportunity to get rid of the car rental tax. We chose not to. We had a chance to get rid of the communication tax. We chose not to. And we also had a chance to lower the BET tax, and we chose not to. So I think we're being very prudent. This is not the reason this was a goal from years ago that I think symbolically is important to get this tax down to 7.5%. And it's only going to cost, I think it's is it 8 million? 8 million, right. But we understand Representative, the Minority Leader's position about, and we understand all of the things you mentioned, and that's why we've shown restraint in not lowering some of these other taxes at this point in time. Thank you.
Representative Janesian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would just like to make the point that the BPT tax and the BET tax are paid by businesses both large and small. It's not as though somehow the big businesses avoid the BET tax. So this is a tax lowering to 7.5 will help small business as well. Thank you.
Representative Ames.
I just want to, well, first I want to acknowledge Representative Ramey's point that the majority has shown restraint in dealing with bills that call for tax cuts in this year's work on bills, so I appreciate that. But nonetheless, we are faced with a bill that does add another increment to the cuts in taxes that have been made of about $8 million once it gets up to full speed per year. And that's a significant amount of money when added to all the other amounts of money that are lost through the other cuts. And this effort needs to be viewed in the context of what's happening on the property tax front. We have to look at all taxes. And although it's uneven, and that's why I think each of us sees a different picture, you look at it from where you sit and stand and live. So if you're in a town that's got high property taxable wealth, you're likely going to have low property taxes and maybe even have benefited in the last 2 years from the efforts that have been made to send money down to municipalities. But if you're in a low property wealth town, and some of us are, we've seen a different picture, and our businesses and our our owners of homes are facing property tax increases that I'd say, without exaggeration, in some cases dwarf the business tax cuts. Just a couple of days ago, last Friday, at the economic forum that was convened by Representative Major and others, a business owner from Jasper, from my town, spoke, and when asked, said that what he worries about, what he looks at, are property tax consequences and costs, and that the business tax really isn't something he pays much attention to. He runs a manufacturing facility, small. That's his perspective. So we're cutting the wrong tax. We should be thinking about state aid to school districts and towns that really need it, making sure we've got formulas that send it to the right place. And I think a bill like this, it's just an increment, but it's $8 million, goes in the wrong direction. And so that's why I'm going to vote against it.
Thank you, Representative Ames. Any further questions or comments?
Can I respond to that?
Representative Bromley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this past budget, let me mention two things that we did in that budget. First, for years, the state aid to the towns was in the low 20s. This year, in the budget, we had to compromise. We've increased it to 30%. So the towns are going to get more state aid than they ever have before. Some wanted it to be 40. I was actually a co-sponsor of the bill to make it 40%, but the compromise was 30%. Then we did something rather unique in the second year of the budget, is that we took $100 million, because we had such a surplus. We wanted to make sure there was true tax relief to taxpayers, property taxpayers. We took $100 million and we put that over from the general fund into the education trust fund. But when the DRA did their calculation, instead of the 361 million that's swept, they're basing that calculation on 261. And that guarantees that everybody's, it's not a big number when you look at all the communities, but it's still something that we did to reduce property tax rates for folks. So we're trying. And yes, we have a ways to go to try to find ways to continue to do that. But that last way was unique in that we made sure that money went back to the property taxpayers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions or comments? Representative Almy.
Thank you. The way that we did 100 million the term before, and it was sent to the school districts that had the highest costs, compared to their property. It went to the places that needed it most. This 100 million went to the communities which had the greatest property wealth, which means to the richest communities most. My community of Lebanon has a huge amount of commercial property, industrial property, and our housing prices are going up, but they're nowhere near Hanover's. And our property taxes are pretty high, but because of that wealth, we balanced out this year. People aren't noticing that when they are arguing about the school budgets. But the communities around me are bedroom communities. They have a lot less property wealth. Some of them, only Hanover is wealthy, but the others are varying degrees of low and middle income, mostly, and they suffer more. And of course, Claremont suffers a great deal more. They are not helped by this. I doubt Charleston is helped by this. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Representative Gamalo.
If I remember correctly, Deputy Commissioner Lear said that all BPT payers do not necessarily pay the BET. She didn't elaborate on those circumstances, but someone asked directly, and she said, no, that's not necessarily so. So I just wanted to correct that. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm gonna ask the clerk to call the vote on the amendment 0471H.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will begin the roll call vote with Representative Abrami.
Yes?
Representative True.
Yes.
Representative Ullery.
Yes.
Representative Doucette.
Yes.
Representative Lang.
Yes.
Burstein votes yes. Representative Janigian.
Yes.
Representative Nunes.
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury.
Yes?
Representative Wallace.
Yes.
Representative Aaron.
Yes.
Representative Almy.
No.
Representative Ames.
No.
Representative Ebel.
No.
Representative Malloy.
No.
Representative Schomburg.
No.
Representative Tucker.
No.
Representative Gomarlo.
No.
Representative Loftman.
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
No.
Representative Murphy.
No.
Chairman Major.
Yes. The vote being 12 to 11, the amendment passes. We are now on the House Bill 1221 as amended. And Representative Janedian, you made the motion?
Yes, I make the
So-
motion of ought to pass on House Bill 1221 as amended.
Second?
And seconded by Representative Browning. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the vote on ought to pass as amended with amendment 0418H.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bill is House Bill 1221, OTPA. We'll begin the roll call vote with Representative Abrami.
Yes?
Representative True.
Yes.
Representative Ullery.
Yes.
Representative Doucette.
Yes.
Representative Lang.
Yes.
Burstein votes yes. Janigian.
Yes.
Nunes.
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury.
Yes?
Representative Wallace.
Yes.
Representative Aaron.
Yes.
Representative Almy.
No.
Representative Ames.
No.
Representative Ebel.
No.
Representative Malloy.
No.
The Honorable Representative Thomas C. Schomburg.
No.
It's like hearing angels sing.
You can't get me with that sweet voice, okay?
Representative Tucker.
No.
Representative Gomarlo.
No.
Representative Loftman.
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
No.
Representative Murphy.
No.
Chairman Major.
Yes. The motion about to pass on House Bill 1221 as amended with 0418H passes by a vote of 12 to 11. And it definitely will be on the regular calendar.
Mr. Chair?
And who's doing
Mr.
the
Chair?
minority?
Representative Ames.
The amendment. Mr.
Yes.
Chair, you misspoke on the amendment number. I believe you said 0417, it's 0471.
One 471H, right. 0417.
71,
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks for the correction. Zero 471H. Made my correction. Thank you. We're on the last bill to be exact. And that's House Bill 1524-FN, establishing a National Service Alumni Attraction and Retention Fund. Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion on HB 1524 of ITL.
Representative Spilsbury makes a motion of ITL on House Bill 1524. Do I have a second? Representative Noonan seconds it. Representative Spilsbury, you want to talk to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank diligent members of the Democrat caucus who've put a lot of time into this, and I appreciate it. Representative Wilhelm, it's good to have you here today when your bill's taken up. And Representative Schomburg, Representative Murphy, you're a delight to work with. So I have appreciated that this has been something that we've discussed a fair bit outside of committee session. And certainly it was my hope to clarify any critiques that I had made and give full opportunity for them to be addressed. And in fact, I think that through 4 amendments, there have been steady improvements. The bill is far better off with the most recent amendment from Representative Murphy. And I would suggest that regardless of the final outcome on the bill, that we should adopt the amendments so that the bill is in its best position. Nevertheless, I think the bill still has some serious flaws. And I say this with full respect to the quality of those individuals who choose to serve in the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps and, to use the term of the bill, satisfactorily complete their terms of service. They, of course, have an arrangement through that program, stipend. They get an enormous amount of valuable experience from a workforce development perspective. I believe that they emerge from their 2 years in Peace Corps, their year in AmeriCorps, much better positioned to join the workforce. So there's certainly a sympathetic position behind the bill in terms of supporting those who go on for further education or those who seek employment. And I understand that it's principally a retention program for out-of-state employees. But it still lacks a lot in terms of describing the mechanics. It's not clear to me what action it is that the educational institution or the employer has to take to trigger the match, or how it's demonstrated. It's been clarified that the amount of up to $3,000 and potentially $6,000 is based on per term of service. There's nothing in the bill that indicates how these payments are extended in relation to terms of study, whether that's a semester or a year or a multi-year program. There's no criteria really for the variance in discretion of granting $300 to $3,000, unless perhaps it's meant that that depends entirely on how much is being matched. That's not even clear. I think one of the other unfortunate things in the bill is that it's been represented as a 3-year pilot program, but there's no sunset. It's been represented as requiring $750,000 over 3 years at $250,000 a year, but it seeks to have $750,000 of funds set aside all at once in FY23, which is unbudgeted, of course. And it seems to me, the way it's written, that it suggests to the governor that he might look to see if there's available ARPA funds, but it doesn't require him to find the funds there. Therefore, it appears to me to be a unbudgeted, unappropriated expenditure. So I just think that the bill has too many flaws to allow it to go ahead. And I say that with total respect for the purpose.
Thank you, Representative Spilsbury. Further questions or comments? Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Spilsbury. Certainly in an era of really partisan politics, it's been a pleasure to pass back and forth some of the comments in the amendments that have been worked on. I think as talking to Representative Wilhelm about the bill, the intent was not to get too deeply into the weeds, so to speak, as to the details, But in an effort within the amendment, it was made to basically state that a term of service was a term of service either in the AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, not necessarily related to anything regarding a term in a college or a university. The intent was also that the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps have different lengths of time in service. That length of time in service may be compromised by a geopolitical problem. Say if you were in the Peace Corps in Ukraine right now, that may, interrupt your time of service and may shorten it substantially, and therefore there was a certain laxity in the amount of monies that would be matched to support these individuals. But satisfactory completion of service is actually determined by the rules and certifications of both AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, and we were trying to leave it at that point to have them determine who has or who has not completed a successful term of service. It was also the intent that, again, without becoming too heavily detailed and prescriptive in its rollout, that an eligible student had to have received a grant or a scholarship from a university or have spent at least 1 year of service in the employment of the employer's business. Those were stipulations that were made, and whatever the college or university or the employer gave in debt relief for college and education, that monies would be matched out of ARPA funds without any implication or any impact on the general fund or the educational trust fund to the same dollar amount, not to exceed in the lifetime of their participation any more than $6,000. So I think the amendment, and again with Representative Spilsbury's encouragement, we did put a finer point on some of the questions that were raised. I also reflect on this in a sense of the intent of the bill, at a 50,000 foot level is really the intent to recruit and retain what I would consider, and I think we would all agree, are very qualified, quality, high-valued, committed individuals, whether they are in graduate studies or in their employment. We know by a lot of the data that we see from various organizations in the state, people graduating from high school tend to leave the state and do not return. If they do come back into graduate studies, college, or employment, bring in their family, there's a much greater chance that these folks will stay in the state. Last week, we heard from Dan White from Moody's and also Phil Sletton from New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute. Since we have been involved in the pandemic, our number of the jobs have returned to the state. But shockingly, we have lagged way behind in job participation. We are at 97%, where the country is at around 99%. That's a huge problem for our state with an aging population, increasing retirement, and young individuals leaving the state and not returning. We are setting ourselves up to have a very significant job force problem. The intent of the bill is really, and somebody actually brought up in the committee in one of the work sessions, why do we want to be the first in the country to establish this sort of program? I would argue if you're number 50 in the country with regard to job participation, we ought to be looking at those numbers and really addressing those with any program we can. If in fact we are putting forward ARPA monies without any implication to the general trust fund, the educational trust fund, if we are bringing back mature, quality people to study here and or work here, if we are doing this without any impact to the general fund or any other funding here, why would we not do that? Yes, it is a 3-year trial. If it is successful, then I think the next step, logical step, would be to look for alternative funding to help, support this, whether it's public or private. That could be determined later, but I think we will not know that unless we actually trial it. So I appreciate that. I think what the intent was, and again, I'm respectful of your comments, we were trying not to get so deeply involved in the wordage, but I think it is clear that these are ARPA funds, that if a school or university is working within the Coverdell Fellowship programs or the AmeriCorps Schools of Service program, or if an employer is enrolled in the Employers of National Service program, there are certain guidelines with which they are working within in order to give grants and or monies to these individuals. I think in this state, we are clearly at a point where we need to focus on our workforce. We focus on housing, but we don't have a housing problem if we don't have a workforce. So unless we really start thinking about this and starting to initiate programs, I think we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult position going forward. So I would encourage and hope that people would support this bill. Representative Wilhelm has put a lot of effort into this, and I think as we all agree, and as you mentioned, Representative Spilsbury, the motion or the motive behind this is laudatory, and I think that we ought to, step forward to help our universities and colleges and our employers bring in excellent people into these systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Representative Longman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just within the hour, we execed a bill that we believed in its intent, and it wasn't perfect, but we knew we could fix it in the Senate. We agreed on that. In the last bill, we talked about how we can help business, and we thought yet another shaving of a fraction off of a business profits tax was the best way to help business. But when I talk to business, every single time, the first and foremost issue that comes up is workforce. This bill actually does address that problem. So, if we can focus and prioritize initiatives, efforts, bills like this that help to attract and retain workforce in this state, that's going to go a lot farther, in my opinion, and I would wager many business owners' opinion than yet another fraction of a point off of a tax that they didn't ask for. Now, how you feel about that doesn't matter, but I'd say workforce-related initiatives like this is huge for business, and that's why I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Representative Elmy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What the employer has to do to trigger this is in the bill. They have to enroll in a national program called, several of them, Employers of National Service and the AmeriCorps Schools of Service or the Peace Corps Coverdell Fellows Program. I think one of the intents of what they want to do besides proving this concept is to get more businesses in New Hampshire involved in these retention and training programs that will give them the workforce they need, and enrolling in those programs as business owners. There is no sunset, because the idea was that they figured that they would go through about $250,000 a year. $750,000 over 3 years versus $8 million that we just spent per year on this 0.1% concept. And it sets the 700, the way we've rewritten it, it sets the 750,000 aside at one time. And no, there is no sunset. The sunset would be if they cannot attract funding later, probably from business groups, to keep this going, because it is a reliable source of new labor that is well educated and creative. And then finally, yes, it is unbudgeted, but the way this legislature has always worked is that it to put that money in. And in this particular case, because it would, the sponsor's idea was never to take it out of the general fund. It was to go after money that is in ARPA that covers this. And the governor has control of the ARPA funds. The governor would have to decide whether he's actually going to appropriate that money out of the ARPA fund if this bill passes. It seems likely he would, since he has a representative on Volunteer New Hampshire. And he also cares about the workforce. I wanted also, there was an email that you got, it was at noon yesterday, so maybe some people read it, from Gretchen Stallings, the Executive Director of Volunteer New Hampshire, pointing out the very large number of dollars, $3 million a year, that they regularly grant and disperse to different groups of people drift around the state on behalf of the federal government. They know how to do this. And it, City Year, New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, Goodwill Industries, Squam Lakes, Epilepsy Foundation New England, Student Conservation Association, Goodwill Industries, Campus Compact for New Hampshire, United Way of Greater Nashua, Animal Rescue League New Hampshire, Belknap County Conservation District, Friends Forever, Inc., Girl Scouts of the Green and White Mountains, Haven Violence Prevention and Support Services, Lakes Region Community Developers, Merrimack River Watershed Council, and Willing Hands, which is something in my area. These are all nonprofits around the state. They want to get more into helping with the general economy. And this would give them 3 years to try it out if the governor approves of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ames. Anybody else? I mean, oh, boy. So, I apologize, Representative Elmy.
Well, I mean, you called me a Brahmin too.
That's because we're getting more like family. All right. Anybody else wish to, more questions or comments? If not, we're going to call the vote on ITL on 1524.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will begin the roll call vote with Representative Abrami.
Yes.
Representative True.
Yes.
Representative Ulrich.
Yes.
Representative Doucette.
Yes.
Representative Lang.
Yes.
Representative Burstein votes yes. Representative Janigian.
Yes.
Representative Nunez.
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury.
Yes.
Representative Wallace.
Yes.
Representative Aaron.
Yes.
Representative Almy.
No.
Representative Ames.
No.
Representative Ebel.
No.
Representative Malloy.
No.
Representative Thomas C. Schomburg.
I wish my brother from Nottingham and I could agree, but no.
So do I. Representative Tucker.
No.
Representative Gomarlo.
No.
Representative Loftman.
No.
Representative Wilhelm.
No.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
No.
Representative Murphy.
No.
Chairman Major.
Yes.
12-11.
The vote being 12 yes and 11 no, the motion of ITL on 1524 passes. It will go on the regular calendar. And do we have, who's going to write the minority report?
Susie's trying to figure that out.
Representative Murphy. Okay, we are through with our executive session, and we can go on to the recess hearing on House Bill 1584. And let me-
We're going to be back in 1 minute.
Okay.
Do we want to tell the, they can leave the, we're not gonna vote on this, right?
Okay,
Well,
Wallace, Representative Wallace. You don't need to stay if you don't want to.
No, we're not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could you remind the people that are doing blurbs that they have to get those on by till 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock
Yeah.
this afternoon?
All the committee members are going to be writing the blurbs. I need the blurbs by 2 this afternoon, both the majority and the minority reports. If they're not, then we'll go without them. Okay, we want to get started with our recess hearing. So those that aren't going to stay, if they move out quickly, I'd appreciate it. Oh, I gotta wait for my clerk. Yeah.
I don't know where he went.
Okay, we have a substitute clerk for a few minutes. The first pink card I have is from the sponsor. Wait a minute, no. Oops,
Yeah, he's prime sponsor.
yeah, right, but I have to get the right bill. The prime sponsor, Representative Ladd, and Representative Ladd, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman Major and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I see your clerk is back. He enjoyed being with us in education yesterday till 6 o'clock last night and the previous day. Of course, we do have a clerk, and we have one that's on deck and one's in the hole. And we have 3 clerks, and we've used them all and burned them out. So I'd like to introduce 1584. For the record, my name is Rick Ladd. I hail from Haverhill, New Hampshire. The Haverhill that's in New Hampshire, not the one in south of us in Massachusetts. 1584 was submitted to establish an improvement grant, capital improvement grant program for the state fairs which exist in our state. And the State Fair Association has approximately 11 state fairs now currently operating within that association. And within that association, there's definite rules and criteria for being a member. I won't go into that. This bill was, we want to continue supporting our fairs to promote agriculture in our state, which is a key industry and a key economic driver in many locations throughout north, south, east, and west. It's also a rural economic development factor that we need to look at and maintain, and it's an education factor, and this is why from the education side of things I got very involved with it, and working with our Future Farmers of America and with the 4-H'ers. So what we're looking at is are these fairs, and during the past several years, I would say the last 20 years or so, there has been no support for these fairs other than what you can get at the gate as revenue coming in, or what they pay once they're inside. And to keep these fairs operational due to the numerous code changes we've had in terms of health, life, and safety, in terms of the amount of energy has to be used in these, with 3-phase having to be brought in, it's been very, very difficult. So the overall purpose is to try to establish an improvement grant program that's under the management of the Department of Agriculture and Marketing, Commissioner Jasper, and to have a non-lapsing fund available in which folks could apply for a grant to help them with their capital improvements. Now, there is certain criteria and conditions that must be met, and I'm not going to go through them. You can read the bill just as well as I can, and I know you're busy, so I won't go through those conditions and criteria. 5% of the grant money appropriated can be left behind for administration of the program at Department of Ag. where we got the idea for putting this forward was from numerous states throughout this country, from Washington State, Vermont, Utah, Kansas. So it's a bit of everything in it. Back in 1939 in this state through 1987, we had Rockingham. And from that, from the pari-mutuel pools, distribution to the fairs from a portion of the tax gained from these pools was used in support of the fairs. And in 1979, that generated approximately $275,000. And for the agricultural fairs, of which $50,000 was for fair improvements. The fair improvements are going on in the fairs right now. It's very, very costly to, as I mentioned, to upgrade these buildings and grounds. And so the fairs are trying to deal with this through they have jacked up their admittance rates to get into the fairgrounds, and it's really at a very low rate in terms of about $15 a head, thereabouts, give and take the various fair, whether you're in Rochester or whether you're up in North Haverhill, where I hail from, where we have the North Haverhill Fair. The fairs generate, and from what I've gotten through the Plymouth State University, where they have done research on this, is that I'll go back the farthest I could get, was in 2002. Visitors, exhibitors, and operators spent an estimated $40.6 million at or near the fairgrounds during the fairs, including $400,000 in direct purchases from those on the grounds. So it is a revenue generator. It slipped in 2011 to $37.1 million, of which those fairs back then had approximately 907 jobs that they needed to make their fairs operate. Since then, the number of people that are paid to do these fairs has shrunk significantly. And in Haverhill, for example, 300 volunteers are used each year to make that fairgrounds work. They're also using the buildings and their folks here for storage during the winter months so that there is revenue coming year round. In order to be qualifying for one of these grants, you ought to be operational at least 3 days in which there is a fair offered, of which there's 8 hours per day. And that's generally speaking what you will see. Not generally, that is what you're seeing for anybody that would be applying for a grant from you. They're all nonprofits. Some of the fairgrounds are currently paying their property tax. Others are, and they're paying that property tax, not looking for an exclusion or an exception from the town, simply because they do not want to pass that burden on to the taxpayer. That's a mixed bag amongst our fairs right now. They are trying everything they can. However, the capital improvements, the budgets which they have that built in. However, it can't keep up with some of the code restrictions that we must have in our fairs. And I hate to see New Hampshire's fairs, which are a draw. When I was coming to the North Haverhill Fair, I just spent a couple days out in New York State, out in Niagara Falls. And as I passed through the Rutland area, I stopped at the visitor center in Vermont. And the lady at the counter said, "I see you have New Hampshire plates on your car. I'm going to be over there in Pike tomorrow for the opening of the North Haverhill Fair." We attract people from all over New England. We need that revenue. We need to support these fairs. We need to support our education and all the economics around these fairs. It's a driver of our economy, and I hate to see it go down the toilet. Thank you very much. I'll be glad to take any questions. There's others here that can give you more specifics than myself.
Thank you, Representative Ladd. Representative Bromley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. I just want to make sure. So the 250 is an ask every year?
Yes, and we put that in there. I talked with the commissioner. You know, at first I was, let's go for the sky. And he said, no, be careful. And that may be high. I don't know. But we need to have some kind of an area where we can go and seek that money in these circumstances to help us with the capital needs. You're required, if you receive a grant, to put in a match up to 15% or higher to supplement what you're asking for.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Representative Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Ladd, for your testimony today. When we had a previous hearing on this bill that we recessed, I believe it was Representative Dutsey who was asking the question of why wouldn't we have local businesses be paying towards the upkeep or capital improvements of these properties if they are receiving such a benefit of increase of their business because of all the visitors that come.
I hate looking around this doing here, but we have the local businesses in the area that I live in right now that are paying to be exhibitors there within the fairgrounds. So that's a revenue that comes in. They're also providing support throughout the the annual year to support our fairs through their volunteer services and providing supplemental equipment, etc., to help do some of these jobs. That's how we put a park in up there in the Haverhill area. We did that in conjunction with our business community. And that was a free service that they were providing. That we're getting that out of folks like the Agway folks right there in Haverhill. So yes, we're going down that road, but the expenses, the costs are exceeding what our revenue is.
Thank you. I'm glad you clarified that.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much, Norm.
The next is Commissioner of Agriculture, Sean Jasper, in support of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Sean Jasper, Commissioner of Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food, and I am here in support of the bill. Now, the chairman has reminded me that I should stick with the issue of the fund, because the policy has been adopted by the House on a vote of 236 to 105. So the House has spoken very strongly that they are in support of this concept. I do want to just deviate from that a little bit. So the history of state support for our fairs actually goes back well before the Civil War. There have been starts and stops, but the state has had a general policy over the years of supporting our fairs, recognizing the importance to New Hampshire and to promoting agriculture, and actually through 4-H and many of the other youth organizations, getting the youth involved, and this is an opportunity for them to show and to learn, and for obviously kids who do not come from rural areas to learn about agriculture. So I'll stop there. Of course, I'll be glad to answer questions moving forward. But why a non-lapsing fund? Well, these expenses are not lineal. You're not going to have the same needs every year. As many of you may know, tragically, Rochester Fair, which has been struggling and actually was closed for a year before reorganization, lost a horse barn just last week to fire. So there's a real need there, and that is not going to be something that hopefully we see every year. We do have the component of matching. We do want to see in community involvement. There are going to be times when the needs are going to far exceed a $250,000 a year appropriation. These improvements are getting very expensive. Many of the life safety codes, some of which I find to be ridiculous given the nature of the structures, are still putting a tremendous burden on the fairs. That's something that we as government are doing to the fairs. And so I think this is important. It does continue a tradition that has existed, albeit has been a lapse now of over 40 years. But if you look at that 275,000 roughly that went to the fairs 43 years ago, that number would be what? Well over $500,000 at this point, and we're asking for $250,000. So I'll end my testimony there, but be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Jasper. Representative
Schamberg. I went to Hilton Head also, so we're getting closer to home. We're going to remember my name here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my questions. I do have some follow-ups on this. Coming from the state of Ohio originally, every county has a fair. How many fairs are there presently being run in the state of New Hampshire?
I believe the number is 11. We have lost a couple of fairs since the state has stopped. Most recently, Stratham has stopped. They may try to do something, but it's not going to be a full-blown fair. Plymouth actually did not survive the transition, and I think very quickly after the state stopped supporting, Plymouth went away, and other, as I said, Rochester has struggled, others have. And unfortunately with the fairs, much like agriculture in general, very dependent on the weather. If we could guarantee that every fair had sunny weather for their runs, I don't think we'd be asking for this, but that's a problem. And I do think that most every state does support their fairs, recognizing the value to the state.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman.
Follow-up.
On page 2, line 5, it starts 426-B:4, and it's Roman numeral it's lines 7 and 8 under that. However, the commissioner may make exceptions to the above conditions and criteria. Is there a report that you would, or the agricultural commissioner would send out to a committee within the state legislature? Page 2, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
No, you said
Line
page.
5, and then it goes 7 and 8, the lines 7 and 8 there. The commissioner may make exceptions.
All right.
I just like to know who does the commissioner report to when they make exceptions?
Well, I don't think that's in the bill, and certainly that would be a reasonable amendment, in my opinion, to the bill to have the commissioner give a report of the expenditures to someone. Obviously, those expenditures will be out there in general as part of the process, but I think to have a specific report go to a committee of the legislature would not be unreasonable in the least bit.
And my final question, follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow-up.
Do you feel that these organizations maybe should create a foundation and raise money through the vehicle of the foundation?
I don't think they need to have a foundation. They're already able to raise money, but it is very difficult. I will say that the Cornish Fair had a very successful fundraising for a livestock pavilion. I was at the dedication this past summer, but they had some very, very generous local tradesmen who participated in that, and it did take a long time to do that. But Cornish is one of the smaller fairs, and you look at some of the needs and some of the neglect that has gone on just for lack of resources, that I think this small amount is something that the state hopefully and certainly indicated by the vote of the legislature is willing to assist, because if we lose our fairs, we do lose a very important part of who we are.
Representative Bromley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Jasper. So, Ways and Means, no problem, us looking at capital improvement grant program fund, establishing that fund, that's in our bailiwick. What's not in our bailiwick is the appropriation of the $250,000 a year. So, now this bill is effective July 1st, so beginning of the second year of our fiscal year, of our biennium. My understanding from speaking to the chair of finance, that she's already has a list of $300 million of asks in first committee bills. Well, 200 plus another 100 million that they want to set aside for the Sununu Center lawsuits. So I don't know procedurally how we're going to do this, but we passed the bill with the 250 in it. I don't know if it goes to fiscal committee to try to get that appropriated down the road. I think you're well versed in this. What's your take on how this will work to get the actual money in it?
Well, I think generally speaking, the money has to be there for something like this to be funded. Now, I was somewhat surprised that it came here and not to finance.
Yeah, that's my point. That's my point. Yeah.
However, this is the beginning of the process. It's certainly going to go to the Senate, and no doubt after the policy committee to Senate Finance, where that would probably be more appropriately discussed but, you know, we are where we are and have the timing. I mean, certainly, you know, if it were to go to House Finance, I don't know what the timing of that is, but it would be somewhat unusual to have Bill go 3 places.
Representative Nunes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Mr. Commissioner.
Good to see you, thank you.
I have a question for you, going back to the funding. This sort of leans off of what Representative Schomburg said just a few minutes ago. In other verticals or industries, we've seen public and private partnerships happen where endowments were made in healthcare, in the arts, where larger corporations came in to help support and fund in a handshake and contractual agreement with the state or other areas. Were there any conversations in the past with any of our New Hampshire larger businesses to see if they would help create endowments to help out with this?
I think the unfortunate part, I guess the simple question is no, or probably not. But I think the reality is that most of the larger corporations don't have any interest in agriculture. Agriculture in New Hampshire is unfortunately, for the most part, a contracting industry. We're losing equipment dealers. They already are as supportive as they can be, and they're stretched thin. You know, we have 4-H, we have FFA. The few that we have who really care about agriculture are constantly being asked for money, and generally speaking, they are very supportive. But when you get into these big asks, there are fewer and fewer businesses who we can ask, and that's the problem, because I know that all the fair associations are constantly struggling with this very question: how do we get the funding? And this is why we're here, because it's simply not there.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Elmy, and we have 5 more pink cards.
Oh my. So there are 2 places in the ARPA funding from which the governor could take money for a one-time contribution. Unfortunately, the majority party in this committee just voted against doing that for another thing that is probably higher on the governor's priorities. But on one of them is the general category economic development, workforce development, and the other one is capital investment in which is a general category in which people are coming in and asking for money for a specific capital maintenance, ranging from $25 million allocated so far down to $84,000. And it's spent almost $50 million now, but there is still money available that the governor hasn't allocated yet. And my question on this side of it is if $1 million could be put into from ARPA to a non-lapsing fund, that would give some ability for the state to figure out a way to recover its revenue position, which is very peculiar right now. We have no idea whether we have a surplus or not. We don't have a surplus in terms of what finance wants to do immediately this year, or is told by others that we ought to be doing immediately this year with the general fund. So my question is, I thought I'd made that clear, was on, do you see that being at least a temporary solution that could last for a number of years?
I suppose it could, but I will ask you that I have an ask into ARPA for capital already relative to food sustainability. We have many food hubs and co-ops, and I have working with folks at UNH and all of these organizations. We put in an ask for money for processing, refrigeration, packing, transportation to be able to allow our small farms to come together and have an impact. Because right now, in order to get into a Market Basket or Demoulas or Shaw's, you need to have the quantity of products and the ability to supply that throughout the year. So that's where my focus has been. In this particular case, you know, currently on the books, there is already a funding of the fairs, but it's not been appropriated. So my feeling is that if the legislature gets to the point where they feel we can't sustain this program, they'll do exactly what's been done in the past and not appropriate anything in this statute notwithstanding. We'll have a change as many do. I think it's time to look to the long term and not just the short term. And so my ask is for a long-term solution to a long-term problem, unlike my other ask, which I think actually gets us off the ground, provides what we need to establish that, and then that in and of itself can be self-sustaining. This is never something that will be self-sustaining.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for taking my question. I guess my question comes around the idea of the fact that what we're really, it sounds like what we're really asking is a reinvestment back in, that the state benefits through tourism dollars, through rooms and meals taxes that are collected. I don't know how much you guys like funnel cake, but I spent plenty of my fair share of money on funnel cake, even though it doesn't show, I suppose. But anyway, what we're really asking about is a reinvestment into these industries that are already providing tourism dollars into our state and rooms and meals dollars into our state, and to finally support them as part of the state program as they're sending money to the state. Is that what we're looking to do?
Representative Lang, I think you said that much better than I did. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you, Commissioner Jasper.
Thank you.
Next is Robert Johnson II, representing the New Hampshire Farm Bureau in support of the bill, and you said you had a handout.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rob Johnson, representing the New Hampshire Farm Bureau as the Federation's Policy Director. Farm Bureau is a federation consisting of the 10 New Hampshire County Farm Bureau organizations with about 1,800 family memberships and another 1,000 supporting and other types of memberships. And we are in support of the bill. We want to first quickly say that we support the bill because we support the New Hampshire fairs and what they provide the state. The affordable family entertainment that provides a number of educational opportunities to the public, such as where the food comes from, exposure to a number of agriculture and forestry types of exhibits, ruleways, that type of thing. But I think most importantly, what the fairs do is that they showcase the work of our youth, which is very important. It's very important to youngsters to have that exposure. And it's something the fairs do maybe better than anything. Again, specifically to the bill is what we support, and Representative Lang kind of basically just said it, I guess, is that it provides some funds, a little pot there that the fairs can leverage for the purposes, as we've heard, to make capital improvements, deal with the challenges of many of them now operate basically on volunteer staffs that are more challenging to obtain all the time. In the interest of time, Mr. Chair, I'll leave it at that, but just with your permission, I have a handout. Business New Hampshire magazine about 5 years ago wrote a pretty short piece, and it does a good job, I think, of speaking to the challenges that we've mentioned here. And I'll leave it at that, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for your testimony. We take questions.
Yes,
Will you
certainly
take
will.
questions?
Yes, certainly will.
Okay. Questions from the committee? You're lucky.
Thank you.
The next is Bob Allen, New Hampshire Fair Association of Hopkinton State Fair.
Thank you, Chairman Major. I did not come here with a prepared speech, but I did want to speak to the committee. I am currently the president of the New Hampshire Fair Association, which makes up the 11 fairs that we've talked about, plus one festival, I believe. And I do know for a fact that each of the fairs that are able to qualify for these funds certainly have needs and uses for them, and not all of them are here today. I'm very familiar with Cheshire, Cornish, and I am a director and treasurer of Hopkinton, so I'm familiar with that fair very well as well. I have talked with some of the people at the fairs that are not represented today, and they are certainly supportive of this bill, although they couldn't all be here to speak. So in that regard, I'm not going to speak for those fairs because I don't know their individual issues and problems, but I can speak to the issues at Cheshire a little bit. They are in dire need of some electrical upgrades. They are in dire need of some bathroom facilities and probably other projects, but those are two that I talked with Gary Davis, who is the president, about just recently this week. At Hopkinton, a few years ago, we did a very extensive electrical upgrade to the grounds. It was somewhere in the vicinity of $500,000. We're still paying off that loan as we speak today, but it was necessary to do in order to create safety through the electrical grid at Hopkinton. We have a project going right now that involves changing the lighting to LED lights to help with the energy costs at the Hopkinton Fair. And we do have a major issue with our bleachers. I'll call them bleachers. Some people call them grandstands, but they're really bleachers, in meeting the codes. And it's probably the only way that we're going to meet those codes is to remove them and build new or do extensive renovations to the existing bleachers. I've had a quote to replace the bleachers entirely. It's over $1 million. That's something that we can't afford and we can't, even attempt to do. So we will downsize, we will modify when and if necessary in order to meet the codes, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to have a show, large show in front of a downsized bleacher system. That said, I don't have anything prepared, but I would take any questions that you might have and turn it over to someone else.
Representative Bromley Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Southwood. Not Southwood.
Thank-
Sandburg.
Thank you for testimony. Over here. Yep. So, yeah, I'm from Stratham, so I understand what's going on in Stratham. It gets tougher and tougher every year for fairs, I understand. And some years, it's all about the weather, right? It's all about the weather. If it's rainy, a couple of days, you lose money. If it's too hot, you lose money. If it's a little better than that, you actually can make a few bucks. And obviously that money gets reinvested into the fairs. I just want you to speak to that real quick. I mean, the efforts that are made, I mean, these aren't big profit-making fairs, correct? I mean, they make some, on a good year, they make some money. And there's boards, I know, that run these fairs that will make judgments as to where to put the money and making improvements. Because obviously improvements do happen without it. But it just seems the last bunch of years it's been tough. Well, first, we didn't have the fair a couple of years because of COVID. And we decided not to reopen as a full fair. We're not going to have the carny rides this coming year. We're going to have, we want to preserve it for the 4-H folks, still have all those things for the 4-H kids and all that. But anyway, but in terms of other sources of money, namely the fairs making money to then put back into capital investments, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can. And to your point, the weather, a few years ago at Hopkinton, the weather forecast, I believe it was for Sunday, was supposed to be in the 90s with high humidity. On Saturday of that day, the crowds were enormous because they knew they were not going to be able to come on Sundays. So you got a beautiful day, it's hot and it's humid, but people don't come. The flip side of that is the weather forecasters can be our biggest enemies when they forecast rain and it doesn't occur. People don't plan on coming, so they don't come. But in terms of making money or reinvesting that money, it's very difficult to spend all the money that you may make in any one year, even though you know you have a capital project that needs to be done, you have a barn roof that needs to be repaired, whatever the case might be. You're always looking at the coming year, and we start this the month after our fair ends. All right, we need to be sure we can open the grounds next year. So what can we do in the meantime between now and next year to support the infrastructure that we already have? And that's a difficult call to make because you never know what the weather's going to be come 2023, for example. So it's something that you have to do, but it's something that you have to be very cautious in doing as well. Because if you spend all of the funds that you make this year, there may not be enough funds to support the fair in the coming year, in the following year, because there are certain fixed expenses which have been talked about. Real estate taxes, insurance, payroll, and things like that. You have to be prepared to cover that.
Thank you, thank you.
Representative Schamberg, followed by Representative Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over here, sir. Thank you. Looking on your third page in, I see that you've listed the fair season of 2017. My question is there a town in each of the counties of New Hampshire that holds a fair, to your knowledge? Do you know?
I can't speak for each of the counties. I don't know that. I know that there is Sandwich Fair, North Haverhill Fair,
right,
Cornish Fair, but
those are fine. All right. And follow up, sir.
Follow up.
Is there a state fair?
Well, the Hopkinton State Fair is the name of the fair. However, people have said and thought that we received monies from the state. That's not true. It's simply a name that we, you might say, pirated once the Plymouth State Fair folded up. We applied for that immediately. The directors at the time, I wasn't on the board, but the directors at the time immediately applied for that designation, but there is no money that goes with it from the state.
Representative Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming today to testify on this bill in this committee. My question to you is, actually I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how any of these fairs may struggle with the expenses to incorporate ADA accessibility on the fairgrounds and the costs associated with doing that.
Well, again, I can't speak for every fair and what they're doing, but I know, again, at the Hopkinton Fair, we have made all of our buildings handicapped accessible as much as we can. We have provided in some of the enclosed buildings special seating for the handicapped, impaired, wheelchair areas, as well as lower seating on the bleachers for people that are mobile but can't climb a set of bleachers or stairs or whatever. So I know at our fair I think we are 100% compliant with people being able to access all of the buildings there, and I'm sure the other fairs are doing similar things, but I can't speak to them directly.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. The next
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next is Mark Perry. From the Granite State Fair.
Good morning. Thank you. You'd all probably know us better as Rochester Fair. Last week we lost a 40-stall barn to fire. It was uninsured. And we are going to have to do some rebuilding. However, when you rebuild something, you have to build it to today's codes. And that's going to involve, in our town, putting a sprinkler system in, which is going to cost more than the barn will itself. These are challenges that the fairs face. You know, the fairs have only a couple real sources of revenue. Your admission is usually your number one. Your carnival is your second. You have to take that money, and that's what funds things like exhibitions, the crafts, the animals. All of those are expenses to the fair. We have very little income that is reaching out to pay all of the outgo of maintaining old buildings. We have a large old Victorian style exhibition building, and it's a constant work in progress to maintain and to bring up to codes. For many years, the fairs didn't necessarily have to bring stuff up to code. It was kind of ignored. And now there's been a real push for handicap accessibility, electrical work. We've all faced that. Many parts of the country, you hear the talk of county fair or state fair. That usually designates a fair that gets financial support from the county or the state. In New Hampshire, the fairs are self-supporting. And it's just something that you're not able to sustain anymore. Most of the help and sponsorship of the fairs came from the agricultural industries because we were agricultural fairs. I'm a dairy farmer in the state of New Hampshire. When I started in 1974, there were 650 dairy farms shipping milk, less than 100 today. That pool of people who are going to sponsor the fairs has gotten smaller and smaller. And we reach out to whoever we have, but there's just so many dollars. And with agriculture exiting the Northeast as rapidly as it is, we no longer have the pool of people to go after for sponsorship. I am old enough to remember when the fairs had a stipend fund, and it was very helpful. You know, other states do. Maine and Vermont have a program similar, and it's been very beneficial. So I hope you folks can support that. Thank you.
Thank you for testimony. Representative Bromley has a
Thank you,
question.
Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. So does Rochester Fair still have pari-mutuel, and do you know of any of the other fairs that have pari-mutuel racing as part of their fair still?
No. We ended pari-mutuel in 2007 after
Oh,
a
it's
string
been a while.
of
Okay.
losing years.
Okay.
We were one of only 3 fairs in the state of New Hampshire that ever had pari-mutuel. And that was Plymouth, and at one time there was a fair in Pittsfield that had pari-mutuel.
Okay. Thank you. So that's not a revenue stream at all. Okay. Thank you.
Hadn't been for many
Has been
years.
years. Okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Representative Schamberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. If the state were to go ahead with this appropriation, you mentioned that your barn was uninsured. Will the county, will these fairgrounds have to have insurance? I don't know if the other ones have insurance on their property, like your buildings.
I can speak to the insurance in Rochester. All of our newer buildings are insured. Some of the older barns they deemed uninsurable because they're hard to secure. You know, we do shut the electricity off in the winter, but
Thank you.
most of our newer buildings are insured.
Further questions? Thank you. The next, we have Neil Kirk from the Granite State Taxpayers in Opposition. Hey, Mr. Kirk.
Representative Major, it's good to see you. And good afternoon to you and to members of the committee. For the record, I'm Neil Kirk. I live in the town of Ware, but I'm here representing Granite State taxpayers. Some of you may know that I was a state representative for many years. Granite State Taxpayers is New Hampshire's oldest statewide taxpayer advocacy group. It was founded in 1990 by the late Governor Mel Thompson and the late New Hampshire Senator George Lovejoy. Granite State Taxpayers opposes this bill for 4 reasons. First, it's special interest legislation. Taxpayers are being asked to subsidize a specific set of businesses. Although largely nonprofit and serving a very important agricultural industry in our state, these fairs do in fact have a source of income and should be self-supporting. Those fairs that are profitable, such as Deerfield, can finance their capital improvements through bank loans. They needn't rely on taxpayers. Those fairs that are not profitable should raise their admission and other sources of income, or, sad to say, cease operations. Number 2, a state subsidy for a dying business, even those that may enjoy and help an industry that's important to our state, is not in the public interest, unless the proponents can demonstrate that the capital improvements will generate an increase in state tax revenues over their useful life, exceeding the cost to the state of the project. 3, the grant program will do nothing to deal with the fundamental problem facing agricultural fairs. Their diminishing appeal to the younger generation and the challenge of keeping fairs relevant amidst trends of declining involvement in agriculture. There are many studies to this effect. 4th, beyond all of those basic points, there are some practical and constitutional problems with this bill. The bill delegates rulemaking to the commissioner. But under our Constitution and the federal Constitution, where we have separation of powers, the 3 branches of government, the legislative branch cannot delegate legislative authority to the executive branch. That's unconstitutional. House Bill 1584 violates this precept in 2 provisions. First, with respect to the basic grant, that's the one for buildings, the criteria are laid out in section 426B.5.2, but not their weights. So, for example, is having high gate receipts being one of the criteria that the commissioner is to consider, a positive or a negative? That depends upon whether the commissioner, not the legislature, decides that the grant program is to be income tested. That's a legislative decision. You folks need to decide that. You can't leave it the way it is in the bill. And then the commissioner is given the exception power. That's on page 2, lines 7 and 8. It was discussed before, without any criteria. So the commissioner, in effect, is being granted the power that the legislature has and must use to legislate. That can't stand without some sort of criteria indicating exceptions for what, based on what criteria. Secondly, there's a second part of this grant program called the health improvements part of the program. That's 426B 6, comma I. There are absolutely
Page
what did I
3?
say? 652. 652. That would be page 2, lines.
Page 3, right?
Yes, thank you. Page 3. Where is it? Yes, page 3, lines 4 through 6. Subject to the availability of funds, the department may provide grant funds on a competitive basis to support capital projects that make health and safety improvements to agricultural fairs, etc. There are absolutely no criteria whatsoever on this program. If the bill is to go forward, and Granite State taxpayers does not wish it to go forward, somebody needs to figure out what the criteria are and put them into the bill. Otherwise, I think you've delegated legislative authority unconstitutionally to the executive branch. For these reasons, Mr. Chairman, Granite State taxpayers asks that you either ITL the bill or refer it for interim study. That concludes my testimony, Mr. Chairman. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Mr. Kirk, could you email or give a copy of your testimony to our clerk?
Will do.
Any questions, Representative Romney?
Yeah, Representative Kirk, former Representative Kirk. Oh, you're always the honorable. It never goes away. So that first unconstitutional
Yep.
thing you mentioned, can you tell us again, page and I missed that one, page and lines?
426B52, that is on page 2. 426.52, that starts on 29, and specifically line 31, this merit rating shall take into account such factors as, and there's a whole list of things there, including gate receipts. That's on line 32. So what you've done is to say, Commissioner Jasper, you have to consider all of these things, but the bill doesn't say what weights to give and what the meaning is, and the commissioner can make this program an income-tested program or open to everybody regardless of the profitability of the fair. There are just no criteria for him to make a decision, and therefore, that's unconstitutional. You folks, as legislators, have to say what it is. You can't give the executive branch regulation writing authority and create the program on its own. You've got to be more specific and set the criteria. What is the program to be? Can the Deerfield Fair get money, even if it's profitable? Or do you want to reserve the money just to fairs that are losing money and that might go out of existence? Whatever the decision is, it's a legislative decision and not an executive branch decision. The way the bill is set up, the decision is left to the executive branch.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Representative Lang.
Thank you, Honorable Kirk, for taking my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is around the discussion around 541A and rulemaking authority that's giving to agencies, and not just in this particular case, but I guess in general, to understand your philosophy on what you're thinking. Are you saying that whenever we give agencies rulemaking authority, say with the EFA programs, that's unconstitutional and we have to be more detailed and more specific in everything we send through the House?
Thank you for the question, Representative Lang. I think the answer is yes. The legislature frequently, in my experience, has set up programs and basically left it to the executive branch to really decide what the program is. The legislature decides, there's a problem and it'll cost $250,000 to fix it, but we'll let the Department of Health and Human Services figure out the rules as to how to make that money fix the problem. I think that is a failure on the part of the legislature, and if it were challenged in court, and it rarely is, admittedly, but if it were challenged in court, those rules would fail for the legislature's failure to create the criteria for the program that enable the rules to implement it. And it's always debatable as to how far you have to go to do that. But I think this is pretty clear that while you've established criteria, the program could go in so many different directions based on the administrative discretion that the legislature, if this bill were to become law, has failed to go far enough to meet its constitutional responsibility to delegate authority to the executive branch.
Thank you. One follow-up question.
Follow-up.
So you don't think that the JALCAR process in using in reviewing and approving administrative rules as a legislative body, both Senate and House, doesn't meet that criteria?
As I understand JELCAR, its purpose is to make sure that the intent of the legislature is implemented by the rules. But were I on JELCAR, were you on JELCAR, I think you would have a very difficult time of saying what the whether the rules met that criteria, because the legislature hasn't set it out. Now, JELCAR could make its own decision and in effect become a mini legislature, but my understanding is that wasn't the basis for granting JELCAR the review authority it has.
Thank you, and I do serve on JALCAR.
And I'm sure you're aware of some of the issues.
Any further questions? Not, thank you, Honorable Neil Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here and to see you folks. Someone said before that this bill probably should have gone to finance, and that probably is the case, but
Right.
it's in your bailiwick now, and good luck.
Okay, the last pink card is from a David Lackey from North Haverhill Fair, who's in support of the bill.
Well, thanks for having us here today, and it's getting late, so we'll try not to keep moving on here. I support this bill. North Haverhill Fair, same as everybody else, we struggle with all the new rules and regulations. Probably for the last 10, 12 years, pretty everything we've had to spend has been into electrical upgrades that are required. And if you don't know, electrical is huge dollars, and you really don't get much back. We're probably better than some fairgrounds as we moved to our location in 1980 and built some new buildings, but as time goes on, now all them buildings are needing repairs, upgrades. Same as Hopkinton, our bleachers are not in good shape. And every year when we get done the fair, well, okay, we did okay, we broke even, we might have made a little money. I think we're like a lot of other fairs. Our off-season rentals is huge to us. We have a lot of wedding receptions in the building. Our storage is big, but it still does not give us enough money to do our capital improvements that we need to do. Somebody made the comment, why don't you guys do more fundraising type stuff on your own? I'm here to say we're the fair that has the 300 volunteers, and with what we do, it just doesn't work to ask our people to do any more for free. It just, it just doesn't work. I'm probably old enough, I've only heard the stories about what used to come when Rockingham Park was going, and it was a huge asset to the fairs, and whatever we could get is gonna be a huge asset now, no matter how big or how small it is. It's a struggle. Our fair's bylaws are to support the 4-H. Luckily, up in Grafton County, we still have a large 4-H group. We have the kids come in, and that's what drives me, is to see these kids in there doing their projects. What the adults get out of it for happiness is great, but the kids is what drives me. So any support would be appreciated, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Aaron.
Oh, there you go. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony today. I'm interested to know what percentage of your income annually is from your off-season rentals and 4-H participation and events and that sort of thing?
I guess I don't have that info to answer.
No.
I know it's a decent number. I know our storage alone is like $30,000 to $40,000.
So as a percentage, though, what, you don't know? Okay, thank you.
I'm the president, not the treasurer.
Okay.
Representative Bromley.
This is a curiosity question now. You mentioned Rockingham Park, and in its heyday, it really did. It was
Yep.
generated a lot of money for the state. So was there an earmark when, in those days, that some of that money went from Rockingham to the fairs? Or you mentioned, you mentioned that, I wasn't sure what you
I
meant by that.
believe I'm in the impression back in the day, 1/4 of 1% of their income or their take went to the fairs.
Okay, so that's the source of, yes.
Mark
and
could
the-
answer that.
And the commissioner is putting a thumbs up, so you got it right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just
At
curious.
that time, that was big money.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, Rockingham Park on its day generated a lot of revenue, so, thank you.
Representative Tucker.
So I'm thinking what would be comparable to that kind of arrangement? Would it be working with sports betting or casinos, or, in other words, they had this minute amount of money from a betting situation, is that correct?
Yes.
That supported the fairs. So we're a big group here. What is comparable now in the state to that we could tag in as an arrangement?
That I don't know. I do know what I think we were setting on was if the state of New Hampshire had ever approved the casino, that's where we were going to go, to do the same thing, to get a percentage of their take. What's out there now, I really don't know.
So there are probably people on this committee who would know.
Go ahead, answer the question, and then.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing would be trying to somehow tap into charitable gaming in a way that allows the fairs to participate in some fashion. Is the closest I could see.
How
to
about
that.
the sports betting, online sports
Well,
betting?
again, that would be a different bill. I mean, we
But
could choose to.
it's a comparability in today's world.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it used to be funded by Rockingham Park. I mean, it was racing. So that's why charitable gaming with historic racing coming, I know a lot of you didn't like that, but with historic racing coming, that would even be closer to it because it's equivalent to what it used to be.
So I'm very keen as a member, someone from Coas County, who has enjoyed the Lancaster Fair most of my life, and now, from time to time, take photographs for a magazine of a newspaper called Country Folks, of fairs. So I've been around to take photographs of fairs. There's just no question in my mind that the importance of our fairs to youth is very, very high. It's the highlight of their year of raising animals, those who are into that. And then those who do the more crafts and things I'm not quite as interested in. It's a target of being prepared for something. In Lancaster, at the Lancaster Fair, there's a close relationship between the regional high school and its CTE program. And they operate and run exhibits where they deal with the public, with younger children. They teach them about agriculture. There's a lot of maple sugaring, and they have a sugaring program at the CTE program at White Mountains Regional High School. So there's a close relationship between education from the youngest in 4-H, the little clover buds or whatever, up to high school. So I'm keen to find a revenue source. But I, on the other hand, realize that Representative Kirk does know a lot about how things work, and we need to find something else perhaps than the arrangement that's in this bill. I think it's a very worthwhile aim, but we need to find something that actually will work.
And that's a
and
would you
produce
believe,
money.
right?
What?
That's a would you believe?
And will produce the kind of money, because we're talking about a lot of money, and this is just a little bit that we're talking about, but when you talk about electrical work at fairgrounds, it's a major problem.
Huge.
First on the codes, and then on energy saving. So it's just a huge problem, I can see that. And so I hope that we can work to find solutions that are perhaps more realistic than what has been mentioned in the bill currently.
Okay, I think Commissioner Jasper wanted to say something.
You You all set with me?
I think there's another question for you, but I just wanted to make it clear that what happened when the parimutuel went to support the fairs, it wasn't because everybody thought, or even Rockingham Park thought this was the right thing to do. It was actually a hostage situation. So Rockingham Park wished to expand to night racing, and they needed legislative approval to do that. And it came down to a situation where one senator was the person who, in 24, it seems like there must have been somebody else involved. I guess that's not the important part. It's the important part is that he said the only way I'm going to allow this to happen is if there is support for the fairs. And since Rockingham Park was there on the table, he grabbed that 0.25%. So it really, that's how that came about. It didn't have anything to do with, oh, everybody thinks this is the way to fund the fairs. It just was that convenient hostage to take. And so that's how it occurred.
Any further questions for Mr. Blackie? Representative Schoenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking this. Would you believe that I think it would behoove this committee to move this to interim study for this bill to make it work, because our future depends upon the farmers and the people that grow and produce our food. Would you believe that?
Yep.
I like your short answer.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. I'm not a public speaker.
Right. If anybody else have anything that they want to say for or against House Bill 1584? If not, then I'm closing the public hearing on House Bill 1584. Thank you for joining us today. Representative Bromley.
So for everybody, and Mr. Chair, the way I look at the calendar, we have 2 weeks left. Next week, we have 3 session days. But the big bill before us is the marijuana bill, the cannabis bill. And if we don't, I guess the question is, are we planning on a Monday or a Friday to do something on the marijuana bill? Or we're gonna leave it all to the last week because of the calendar? We have to have this thing voted out that last week. And I think it's gonna take more than one day to
My
figure this
time
out.
schedule to figure out the rest of the calendar and work around the sessions is within the next hour. I've got to make those
Yeah,
decisions.
and I gotta write a blurb.
So I will say there's a group of legislators that are trying to work out what we can fix in that marijuana bill to make it work.
Try everything.
And I'm happy to take anybody who wants to come and join us. I know a couple of us are going to lunch today to have a discussion about it. And I also have already asked the governor for an appointment to chat with him about any proposed amendments we have to see how that's going to work with his office to make sure that we don't poison pill the bill. If he's in favor of it. So I'd ask for a little bit of time so we can work together. We've had a couple industry experts we've had conversations with, and we'd like to see a bill that we could move forward with. I just had a conversation with finance about their asks and the asks in the bill. So just if I could have some time to try to put together a laundry list of changes to the bill that might make it more palatable to people to be able to go through it.
Okay. Representative Almy.
Thank you. I think we've got a big problem with this in that on the sponsor's view of how much revenue there is extremely different from anything that we've been given from anywhere else. And that they've put policy in there that spends all that revenue that he thinks is coming in. And we're not supposed to deal with policy. We're trying to get some other ways of figuring out the revenue to have a few more triangulations there. But it looks like it's around 40 to 50 million at the most. And with the edibles cut out of it, less.
Again, I think that was, if you're talking about the net revenue to the state,
Yes.
that was the number we were working, basing our amendments and our conversations around was, I think, I don't remember, to be honest with you, who presented the sheet to us that had that number was 49 million based on revenue to the state is what they were estimating. And I'm using that as kind of a basis to establish policy around.
That was the Liquor Commission.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. So I'm using the Liquor Commission's number, not anybody else's number, because I feel that
But it included edibles.
it included a portion of edibles, yes.
Well, a very small portion.
Is
of
it-
it.
No.
So anyway, I just asking for some time to, don't schedule us for Monday. Give us some time to meet and try to develop an amendment, and I'm happy to work with anybody from either side of the aisle to try to get, something that a majority of the committee can support.
But can the chair think about this conundrum we've got of not supposed to be changing the policy?
That's gonna be tough.
Thank you.
Well, I guess you could say that, I guess changing the policy would be making edibles in the bill completely. Or we could say it's a revenue thing because we're adding more revenue by doing so. So I don't know. That's a.
I will skirt that line as close as I can. I promise, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Because the revenue is going to be changed dramatically if you can do the edibles.
Again,
Not the edibles as the bill says now, because that's just the medicinal edibles.
Again, I understand, Mr. Chair, we're going to try and not change a significant portion of the policy. There is some that'll be some minor changes, but again, it's around revenue that we're having the conversation and it changes in policy. So I'm not sure that'll change the underlying legalization aspect of the bill.
It doesn't say anything about the regular edibles. You could,
There is a segment about edibles in the bill. I can't even say the word. I don't even use this stuff. But again, there is some language in the bill already about edibles and allowing edibles in the retail locations for the state. And it's just about how we deal with some of that and what that looks like. So again, it's already in the bill. We're just trying to skirt and clean up some of the language.
Find out that we can use regular edibles.
Right. And again, one of the big things, we're taking some of the easy swings at stuff, like one of the conversation points was around banking, right? It was clear that the banking language, it seemed like to everybody, was unworkable, right? So that was like one of the first amendments I wrote down, strike all the banking language, right? So that's a simple change that creating a state bank isn't reasonable. We heard that banking is available to these agencies, so it's not needed in the bill. Clean language that would help, again, bring some people into the mix and into the fold that might have objected to the bill for that reason. There was a conversation around the funding and how the funding is split up and cleaning up that language to make it, again, a little more palatable to people. Because as I read that bill, I had to go to Daryl, Representative Abbas, 3 times to try to understand what he was trying to do because of the way that bill was worded. And we were trying to clean up some of that language as well. And then we had the simple error that was market consultants versus investigators. That was a mistake in the bill. I have a language to clean that, a portion of the amendment to clean that up. And again, we're meeting the ideas around, the biggest conversation point is around cultivation and whether or not we'll allow the ATC cultivators to be able to sell to the state and what that implications that are, because under the current bill, under the current law, the cultivators can't sell to the state. And so we'd have to play with that language to allow those ATC cultivators to be able to sell to the state to create a market that's already readily available for the state to kick off from day one. So those are just some of the ideas that are floating around trying to deal with.
Okay, we
So-
have to report the bill out on the 24th. Today is the 9th. The 24th is 2 weeks from tomorrow. Next week is blown apart. The 15th, 16th, and 17th. So we have
We have a lot to talk about.
Friday the 18th. And then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and possibly Thursday, the 2nd.
So, Mr. Chair, if you give me till Wednesday of next week, I'll give you some dates that might work at, and we'll have amendments. We can do a work session if you want.
But I think we should still have a work session on the 18th, whether you're ready
That's
or
fine.
not.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a meeting on the 18th.
we
Okay,
with
that's
the
cool.
stuff to
I'll have something ready by then to have a discussion.
But I need to schedule something on by the 16th at 2 o'clock for the following week. If I don't schedule it,
So I'd put a placeholder in, pick a date, pick a time, we'll show up, and if it's not needed, if we finish it all on the 18th, we can just cancel it.
Oh, I thought we were gonna finish it all on the 18th, but that's all right. So, yeah.
that would be great.
And I've spoken to the governor about this twice. And he's adamant. He doesn't want edibles in the bill. Now,
He doesn't.
he doesn't want edibles in the bill. That's why it's such a convoluted bill, the way they wrote it. So, in terms of the edibles. So you talk to the governor. If he says he's changed his mind, if you wanna save a lot of work, but he's assuming that there's no edibles in the bill.
Again, that's my reason for meeting with them, is to have a conversation
Yep,
and
that's
see
right.
what's
Could've changed
workable
his
and what's
mind.
not.
He could've changed his mind. I don't know.
We'll plan on meeting on the 18th.
Mr. Chair, do you want to create a subcommittee and we can work through that, or do you just want to leave it as an ad hoc committee?
We decide we're meeting on the 15th, because we haven't been told this.
Leave it as an ad hoc.
Thank you.
What are we gonna do?
Huh?
Just gonna meet on the 18th? Because we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So we're gonna meet next
Because
Friday.
we have 1 week
That's the
after
earliest we
that.
can meet.
But we are having session on Tuesday, because I haven't heard that yet.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've been told secondhand, but
No, it's in the calendar.
it's in the calendar. Oh,
Tuesday, Wednesday,
okay.
Thursday. Yeah, that came out a week or so ago. Yeah, that's kinda screws us up.
I
That's why
think
I'm
I
saying.
read last week's more
In the
carefully
hey,
than this week.
Susan,
Hmm?
it says, additionally, please hold Tuesday, March
Oh.
15th, March 16th,
Ah,
and the 17th,
okay.
and the 31st.
Yeah,
as
the
prospective
31st I
meeting
had.
dates.
That really makes it impossible to do second committee bills.
I don't know, yeah, we doesn't have time, so, we have no time to work the bills. All right, I gotta do a blur.
Okay, we're through. I need
Mr. Chairman,
need those blurbs.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I really do think that subcommittee ought to be an official subcommittee. I think on this topic, transparency is very important.
Things
I don't think it'll change anything that happens, but I really think it should be an official subcommittee of Ways and Means.
You want to chair this up?
Yeah, sure, but these guys are gonna be working.
Lang. Sir. If I put a subcommittee together, who are the members?
Myself, Representative Nunez, Representative Doucette. And whoever they want to put on
See, the problem is, we can't get it in the calendar for this week.
We
can't
can put it in the calendar for Monday.
For Monday. Yeah.
Susan,